Ayatollah Khamenei expressed disappointment over the international community's inaction against the Israeli regime and called for a diplomatic, economic, and even military coalition to oppose it.
He expressed regret over international inaction regarding the regime and called for a diplomatic, economic, and even a military coalition against it.
Now, the conflicts in the Middle East and the Ukrainian-Russian war, they are being fought in separate regions of the world for different reasons. However, there are a number of connections, and perhaps the biggest, Iran, its proxies, and Russia are seeking to destabilize the Western world and also perhaps take down the United States.
Israel is now at war on 7 fronts. The Middle East has never seen this many wars simultaneously.
But Iran's supreme leader meeting the families of soldiers killed in the bombing, leaving the door open to revenge strikes.
قدرت و توانایی و ابتکار و اراده ملت ایران رو هنوز درست نتوانستن بفهمن. این رو ما باید به اینها بفهمونیم.
What happened over the last couple of weeks or so seems to have brought everything out into the open. Do you think that we're now seeing in inverted commas, normalization of a conflict going on between Israel and Iran?
Obviously, Iran is a major connection. How does that put into global perspective what is happening in the Middle East?
Yeah, I think Ambassador Taylor is absolutely right. This is bigger than just Russia or Iran working together. There's an axis here of countries that are aligned. And even though these are regional conflicts, one being fought in Eastern Europe, one being fought in the Middle East, they are being fought for a global goal and with global repercussions. They might be being fought against Ukraine and Israel in particular.
We are also at the most dangerous juncture in the Middle East in decades. You were briefed yesterday by my colleague on the serious escalations between Iran and Israel this month. Meanwhile, the hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel are inflicting civilian casualties, massive displacement and destruction on both sides of the Blue Line. Armed groups operating from Yemen, Iraq, and Syria also continued to launch missiles and projectiles towards Israel. Israel has reportedly carried out dozens of airstrikes in Syria in the past month. Every effort by all of us must be made to de-escalate the situation and establish a different trajectory towards greater peace and stability in the region.
New threats were issued today by top Islamic Republic officials following Israeli strikes early Saturday targeting the Iranian capital of Tehran. Today, the chief of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps issued an ominous comment warning of bitter consequences that will be unimaginable. A spokesman for Iran's foreign minister issued a more direct threat, saying the Islamic Republic will use all available tools to respond.
2 nights ago, they carried out a malicious act. They, of course, exaggerated, which is wrong. But at the same time, it shouldn't be downplayed, either by saying it was insignificant or unimportant. The Zionist regime miscalculations must be stopped. They are making serious mistakes in judgment. They do not understand the Iranian people. They have not recognized the strength, capability, creativity, and determination of the Iranian nation. They must be made to understand these realities, and it's up to the country's authorities to determine the appropriate response that best serves the interest of the nation and the country.
Well, Stephanie, you've identified Iran as one of the main connections. Iran, of course, is a major supplier of weapons, of drones, of other equipment, missiles from Iran to Russia. And Russia is using this. Russia is having a hard time on several fronts. One is just these weapons and these drones that we're talking about, but they're also having a hard time with soldiers. You mentioned the DPRK, the North Koreans. The North Koreans have now sent probably 10 to 12,000 soldiers into Russia. Soon, if they haven't already, they will be arriving on the battlefield, on the lines that the Russians are fighting against the Ukrainians. But the Iranians and the North Koreans are the ones providing Russia with the capability to continue this fight. I should mention the Chinese. Not weapons and not soldiers, but they are providing dual-use equipment and microchips and other dual-use equipment that allow the Russians to manufacture the kinds of equipment and weapons and ammunition that they need for this fight. So the Russians are drawing on the North Koreans, the Chinese, as well as the Iranians, and the Iranians are the link to the Middle East conflict.
دور روسي الداعي للسلام، لكن دور روسي ليس لن يكون دور روسي إن شاء الله في مشاركة في أعمال قتالية، يعني توجيه ضربات إلى آخره، لأنه لا يوجد طرف بالمنطقة اللي ينسق ويانا هذه الضربات. نحن لسنا مشاركين في هذه الحرب والحمد لله. نحن منذ بداية الأحداث في غزة تساءلنا يعني لماذا يعني المجازر المفبركة في أوكرانيا اللي تم اتهام روسيا بارتكابها، وبعدين لم يتم تقديم أي صورة واضحة ولا نتائج التحقيق ولا شيء. يعني هي كانت تؤدي إلى زيادة ضغوطات على روسيا، فكان العالم كله متحرك. طيب. في حين نرى فعلا يعني جرائم الحرب، جرائم إبادة تحدث أمام الكاميرات، أمام شهود أعيان بشكل واضح، ولا يوجد هناك أي رد فعل، ولا يوجد هناك أي هستيريا في الإعلام الغربي، ولا يوجد يعني لا توجد أي خطوات من قبل قيادات غربية داعين مثلا لفرض مزيد من العقوبات أو أي عقوبات على مرتكبي هذه الجرائم، فهم معروفين. نحن نريد علاقات متساوية ومتوازنة ولا غيرها، لكن للأسف مع مرور الوقت يعني كان الشريك الغربي يتحول إلى العدو الغربي. طيب. وصار ما صار.
هنا تحديدا ماذا تقصد بالشريك الغربي؟ تقصد الولايات المتحدة تحديدا أم تقصد الدول الأوروبية المتحالفة مع المشروع الأمريكي؟
يعني كلهم عصابة واحدة.
كلهم عصابة واحدة. نعم.
نحن في يعني تحليلنا وتقديرنا للأوضاع العالمية كنا ننطلق من أن أوروبا هي قطب، يعني قطب اقتصادي، قطب سياسي. نعم. وحتى يعني أوروبا راهبة في أن تتحول إلى نوع من قطب عسكري. فتبين أن هاي كله كان غلط، يعني تبين أن أوروبا هي خادمة لأمريكا وليس قطب. فلذلك عندما نقول الغرب نحن نقصد الولايات المتحدة وكل الدول اللي تقودها الولايات المتحدة تجاه الجهنم.
We're not just talking about Iran and Russia, but as you mentioned, also China, North Korea. And I want to ask you this because there has been some pushback, not just from within the United States, but also on the international scale when it comes to how the countries are responding to these conflicts, to these wars. They're not being fought in a vacuum. There are so many different connections between the two. How does that work internationally? And Blaise, I want to start with you. When it comes to addressing not just what's happening between Russia and Ukraine, but also what's happening in the Middle East, no doubt that they impact one another. And this is really on a global stage.
Of the reports that have come out in the last few hours that Ali Khamenei, the leader of Iran, is said to be gravely ill, terminally ill. He may only have months to live. Does this raise any prospect of regime change, particularly if there's a leadership vacuum after a change of government in the United States, assuming a Republican victory? What do you make of that? And, you know, I mean, surely the Iranian people must be sick of seeing their money being poured into tunnels in Lebanon and into weapons and so on, rather than into bettering their own lives.
Well, knowing about Israel's ingenuity at dealing with people who attack their country, I think the conspiracy theorists could be forgiven for thinking maybe Khamenei's been slipped some kind of drug by Mossad. I think we can hope that at some point, maybe in the not too distant future, possibly coinciding with Khamenei's demise, I don't know, we could hope to see a different regime in Iran at some point, maybe in the next few months.
Now, Richard, I'm going to ask you to do something very unpleasant, and that's to delve into the murky mind and thinkings of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and try and why you've mentioned we all want to see the Iranian people free. We all want to see the end of the terror regime of the Ayatollahs. That brings peace to the Middle East and peace to the world, potentially.